Welcome back to Mr. G Minister, where we explore powerful Bible stories that continue to inspire us today. Today's story comes from Joshua 24, a chapter filled with wisdom, reflection, and a powerful call to faithfulness. This chapter marks the end of Joshua's leadership over Israel and his final address to the people before his death. Joshua had led Israel faithfully after Moses' death, guiding them into the Promised Land. Now, at the end of his life, he calls the people to renew their covenant with God, reminding them of all that God has done and challenging them to choose whom they will serve. Let's dive deep into Joshua 24 and discover the richness of this story. In the opening verses of Joshua 24, Joshua gathers all the tribes of Israel at Shechem, a place of deep historical and spiritual significance for Israel. This location is important because it's where God first promised the land to Abraham and where Jacob's well was later dug. Shechem was a place of promises made and promises fulfilled. Joshua assembles the elders, leaders, judges, and officials of Israel before the Lord. Then, standing before the people, Joshua begins by speaking on behalf of the Lord, recounting Israel's entire journey from the time of their ancestors. Joshua says, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Long ago your ancestors, including Terah, the father of Abraham, lived beyond the Euphrates River and worshipped other gods. But I took your father Abraham from the land beyond the Euphrates and led him throughout Canaan and gave him many descendants." Joshua 24:2-3. Joshua's words emphasize how God had called Abraham from a life of idolatry to be the father of a great nation. This wasn't by accident. It was God's initiative, God's plan, and God's grace at work. He continues by recounting the journey through Egypt, the oppression under Pharaoh, the miraculous escape through the Red Sea, and the wanderings in the wilderness. Joshua highlights God's provision and protection every step of the way. "I sent Moses and Aaron, and I afflicted the Egyptians by what I did there, and I brought you out. When I brought your people out of Egypt, you came to the sea, and the Egyptians pursued them with chariots and horsemen as far as the Red Sea. But they cried to the Lord for help, and he put darkness between you and the Egyptians. He brought the sea over them and covered them." Joshua 24:5-7. God's hand was always at work, guiding Israel through impossible odds. Joshua's account wasn't just a history lesson. It was a call to remember that God's faithfulness is the foundation of everything they have achieved. Then Joshua goes on to recall the victories that God gave the Israelites over the Amorites, the people of Jericho, and other enemies as they entered the Promised Land. He concludes this section by saying, "You did not do it with your own sword and bow. So I gave you a land on which you did not toil and cities you did not build. And you live in them and eat from vineyards and olive groves that you did not plant." Joshua 24:12-13. God's grace is clearly evident throughout the entire history of Israel. They are living in a land of blessings, not because of their own strength or goodness, but because of God's provision. This reminder sets the stage for Joshua's central message. Israel must now respond to God's faithfulness by choosing whom they will serve. After recounting God's mighty deeds, Joshua presents a challenge to the people, a decision that would define their future. Now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods your ancestors worshipped beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." Joshua 24:14-15. This is the climax of Joshua's speech. He challenges the people to make a clear and definitive choice. They had been tempted by the idols of the nations around them, the gods of the Amorites, Canaanites, and even the gods their ancestors once served in Egypt were all potential rivals to the true God. Joshua doesn't force them to serve the Lord. Instead, he urges them to make an intentional decision. Choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. And then, with great conviction, Joshua declares, "But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." This powerful statement has echoed throughout history, becoming one of the most quoted verses from the Old Testament. Joshua, as the leader of Israel, sets the example for all by making his own commitment to serve God wholeheartedly. In today's world, this same challenge is relevant. We live in a time where many gods compete for our attention, whether it's wealth, power, pleasure, or self-interest. Just as Joshua challenged Israel, we too must decide whom we will serve. Will we follow the fleeting things of this world, or will we commit our lives to God, who has been faithful through all generations? The people respond enthusiastically to Joshua's challenge. Then the people answered, "Far be it from us to forsake the Lord to serve other gods. It was the Lord our God himself who brought us and our parents up out of Egypt, from that land of slavery, and performed those great signs before our eyes." Joshua 24:16-17. They remember what God has done, and affirm their desire to remain faithful to him. But Joshua, knowing the hearts of the people, warns them of the seriousness of this commitment. "You are not able to serve the Lord. He is a holy God. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive your rebellion and your sins." Joshua 24:19. Joshua's warning isn't meant to discourage them, but to remind them that serving God is a serious matter. It requires full devotion, not half-hearted worship. God is not just one of many gods, he is the Holy One, and he requires Israel's complete loyalty. Still, the people insist, "No, we will serve the Lord." And so Joshua establishes a covenant with the people that day at Shechem. He sets up a stone as a witness to the covenant, saying, "See, this stone will be a witness against us. It has heard all the words the Lord has said to us. It will be a witness against you if you are untrue to your God." Joshua 24:27. This moment is a renewal of the covenant between God and Israel. It's a reminder that, just as God has been faithful to his promises, Israel must remain faithful in their worship and obedience to him. After the covenant renewal, the chapter concludes by recording Joshua's death at the age of 110. After these things, Joshua son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110, and they buried him in the land of his inheritance at Timnath-Serah, in the hill country of Ephraim. Joshua 24:29-30. Joshua's legacy is one of unwavering faithfulness. He had led Israel into the Promised Land, defeated their enemies, and most importantly, called the people to serve the Lord with all their hearts. The impact of his leadership continued long after his death, as Israel served the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua and of the elders who outlived him and who had experienced everything the Lord had done for Israel. Joshua 24:31. Joshua's story is one of courage, conviction, and leadership. He was a servant of the Lord who stood firm in his faith, leading others to do the same. The story of Joshua 24 holds important lessons for us today. Like the Israelites, we are constantly faced with choices about whom we will serve. The world offers us many distractions and temptations, but God calls us to make a clear choice. Will we serve him with all our hearts, or will we follow the idols of this world? Joshua's words, "But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord," should resonate with all of us. It's a declaration of faith, a commitment to living a life that honors God, no matter what the world around us may say or do. In a culture that often pulls us in many directions, we need to make a firm decision about who our true king is. Joshua 24 also teaches the importance of remembering. Throughout the chapter, Joshua recounts the many acts of faithfulness that God had shown to Israel. He reminds the people of their ancestors, the Exodus, and the victories they had received. By doing so, Joshua is urging the Israelites to look back and see how God has been with them through every stage of their journey. For us today, the practice of remembering is just as important. In our fast-paced world, it's easy to forget the ways God has worked in our lives. When we face difficulties or moments of doubt, we should take time to reflect on how God has guided, provided for, and sustained us in the past. This strengthens our faith and encourages us to continue trusting him. Joshua's challenge to choose this day whom you will serve speaks directly to the culture of the modern world. We live in a time where individualism, materialism, and self-reliance are glorified. People are encouraged to chase after personal gain, pleasure, and success without consideration for spiritual truths. But Joshua's words remind us that these gods are ultimately empty and fleeting. God's faithfulness to Israel in the past is a model for his faithfulness to us today. Just as he led them into the promised land, he continues to lead us through life's challenges, guiding us to places of peace, joy, and fulfillment in his presence. The chapter ends with a reflection on legacy. Joshua's leadership was marked by his unwavering dedication to God. He wasn't just a military leader, he was a spiritual guide, ensuring that the people stayed faithful to the Lord. His legacy wasn't in his own personal success, but in how he led others to serve God. As Christians, we too should consider the legacy we leave behind. What will people remember about us? Are we leading lives that point others to God? Joshua 24 calls us to reflect on how we are living and to ensure that we are making choices that honor God and inspire others to follow him. Joshua 24 is not just the story of a man giving his final speech. It's a call to faithfulness, a reminder of God's goodness, and a challenge for us today. We must all choose whom we will serve, and that choice defines the course of our lives. Joshua's bold declaration, "As for me and my household, we will serve the Lord," is a message for all believers. It calls us to take responsibility for our spiritual walk and to lead by example. When we choose to serve God wholeheartedly, we not only transform our lives, but also impact those around us. So today, let us heed Joshua's words. Let us remember what God has done for us, renew our commitment to him, and boldly declare that we too will serve the Lord.